Let's see if we got it working. Fifth button. Ta-da! All right, there's Smyrna. You see where it is in relationship to Ephesus?
Yes.
Ephesus is on the coast, just south of it. Smyrna was also a port city. It also had a lot of trade going through it, and so the town itself was very wealthy, just like Ephesus. The difference is that the church in Smyrna, the members of the Christian church, were poor, as opposed to the ones in Ephesus last week that were rich or had a lot. Unfortunately, they were doing a lot of good stuff. We found out last week, all for the wrong reasons. So today we're going to look at a port city that has an awful lot of trade, a lot of wealth going on, but the church itself is not really taking part in that. This particular town also had its acropolises and temples and all of those things built up in the city. In fact, there was one hill that had a lot of the temples on it, and it kind of looked like a crown. You know, where you've got the thing on top and all of the things sticking up. That was the thing that Smyrna was famous for. And so I didn't have a picture of that. You know, they didn't redo any of those pictures. So you're going to have to imagine what it would have looked like with a hill and all these different temples on top of it. So let's get into the scripture itself and see what it is that God is talking to us about. If you'll hit one more time, we'll get to the first one. What is the description of Jesus? There it is. He says he's the first and the last. I was dead, but I have now come to life. We'll find out why that's so important to the church in Smyrna here in a little bit. But just keep that in mind, that his whole description of himself is about the beginning, the end. He was dead and he is now alive. All right, number two. What's number two? The praise that he gives to the church. He talks about the fact that they are, that they have good works. They're in the midst of tribulation. I'm not sure that that's a praise, but that's one of the things that he says about the church. And then he says that he understands that they are poor. I'm not sure that that is one of the praises of the church as well. But in God's sight, it is. Because in God's sight, the reason why these people are going through tribulation is because they're standing against the world. They're standing against the things that the world would sneak into the church. And as a result of that, they are pushed aside. Bless you. They don't have a whole lot of money, so they're not tied into the world. And because they're not tied into the world, bless you again, they are tied more into the Spirit of God. Is that the way it is around the world today? Those folks that have less of the worldly stuff, do they tend to be more in line with the Spirit? Yes. Poverty does not diminish Christian worship. Poverty increases Christian worship. Because if I don't have a lot, then there's nothing that I need to think about so much as focusing on the gifts that God has given us, the promises that He's given us. So these people in God's sight, because I think they were poor, because they were standing against the world and going through tribulation, God saw those as good things. So let's take a look at number 3 and see if God had any problem or any concern with the church. And He didn't. There's nothing in there where He said, but I have this against you. So He is fine with the church just exactly where it is. The word for affliction or persecution that was on earlier actually might translate better as crushing pressure. Imagine that you are going farther down into the ocean, and the farther down you get, the harder that pressure is pushing on your vessel. That's the kind of image that the tribulation word is supposed to carry with us. Something that is crushing the people, not just difficult. So the Jewish temple then is the problem that they are standing against. He says that I know the slander on the part of those who say that they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Well, that's pretty heavy-duty stuff, isn't it? A synagogue of Satan. Why is God calling them that? Well, years before this letter was written, the Jewish people decided to bring into the Jewish temple the worship of Greek gods. Now, what's so wrong with that?
Thou shalt not have any other gods.
Say that again louder.
It's one of the 10 Commandments not to do so.
That's right. One of the 10 Commandments. I am the Lord your God. You will have no false gods before me. But if we go even farther, in the Jewish tradition, there is only one God. To bring any other God into the mix or into the worship is saying that, God, you're not enough. We need to bring in somebody else to kind of finish out or to complement where you are and what you're doing. And so God said that this is a temple of Satan because they're not being the Jews that I had called them to be. A little bit later on, yes, sir.
So he was talking specifically about Smyrna?
He was talking specifically about the Jewish synagogue in Smyrna. Okay? Very, very clear about that. The Jewish synagogue also began to do worship of Caesar, which was anathema to God. I mean, once you got to that part, it's like, okay, well, write you off my list. And that's really what God was doing when he was talking to the church, saying that the Jewish people, the synagogue, was a synagogue of Satan. Then he says in verse 10, do not be afraid for what you are about to suffer. Don't you love that word, suffer? I didn't become a Christian to suffer, God. Beware, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison so that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have affliction. Wait a minute, I didn't become a Christian to have affliction either. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. Let's look at number 4. The things that he's telling them to do is to not fear and to be faithful even unto death. Why should they fear? What is it that they might fear?
Pain.
Pain. Any of y'all fear pain? Yeah, I do too. Okay. A certain amount of pain. All right. There's a certain threshold. Once you get above that, you don't like that. Okay, that's fine. But that was part of it, the fear of pain that they would be going through. What other fear might they have had in those days? The fear of death, the fear that they would be put to death and not be able to continue living in this world. Were they afraid probably to lose everything they had?
I would say
Probably not, because they didn't have much to lose. And you know, when you only have a little bit, it's like, okay, well, go ahead and take it. No big deal. But the fear that they had was a real fear of being thrown in prison, having to go through difficult times, torture, probably starvation, all of those things. And God says, don't be afraid. Be faithful even unto death. And he says that to us today too. Don't be afraid. Be faithful even unto death. Now, here in America, it's much easier to be a Christian because we don't have folks going around hunting Christians to shoot. But in a lot of the rest of the world, to be a Christian is to have a death sentence on your head. So we are a blessed country in that we don't have to deal with that. But in many other ways, those other countries, the people who become Christians are serious about being Christians. It's not just, oh, well, you know, I get to go to church, and if I don't want to next week, that's fine.